Today I'm in the Royal Station Hotel, Newcastle, with my parents. The station started to be built in 1847 and was extended in 1891. The building is a massive Victorian structure with a very impressive staircase and chandeliers. Might I say hi for the camera? It's good. To the historic cathedral town of Durham, which is also Oriental University. Durham was repeatedly built on 7 hills by road. I don't know if that's true, but there definitely are a lot of hills to walk down. We're now approaching North Road. For those of you who may have attended Durham University, I'm sad to note that Studio has closed, and the club next door, which was then Walkabout when I attended, has been replaced by a new one called Babylon. The historic part of the city, however, is largely unchanged. In the background you can see the world-famous cathedral and castle, which are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Where we're standing is a historic bridge, known as Elvet Bridge, itself dating from the medieval times, just like the castle and the cathedral. It's Remembrance Sunday, and the market square is filled with well-wishers for the military and a very excited dog, which seems incredibly interested in the contents of that man's bag. As I mentioned, I attended university here, and this law department was had several of my law tutorials. It's currently under renovation for repairs. Not posh enough for people to have individual servants, but was posh enough for people to have servants. This is Hatfield College, yeah. As mentioned in the prior clip, I'm just walking around some of the colleges on the Bailey near the castle and cathedral. These are where the older and more historic colleges are based. It's not like the poshest of the colleges, but it's a bit more posh than Trev's. Ahead of me is 24's, University Debating Society's rooms for drinking after debates with guest speakers. Where students can ask further questions. This is at the heart of the Bailey, the historic complex that dominates Durham. In the distance are what I think are meant to be historical reenactors from the Durham Life and Infantry, a regiment which is now disbanded. Further along the Bailey we can find St George's College, originally the clerical college. Because of this being clerical, no alcohol was allowed on the grounds, but the cunning students got around this by building a bar in the basement. Slightly further down here we have St Cuthbert's Society. As this was a society and not a college, it also had slightly different licensing laws, and I believe the bar could stay open for slightly longer. Ahead of me is Prebends Bridge. Prebends Bridge was built in the late 1700s as a route for the Dean and senior members of the Durham clergy to enter the Bailey. It's one of the most picturesque places in the whole of the city, and you get incredible views along the river. When the trees are starting to turn in their autumn colours like this, there's no better place in the country. Bridge reads as follows: Great House of Durham, yet well I love thy mixed massive piles, half Church of God, half castle against the Scots, and long to roam these venerable aisles, with records stored of deeds long since forgot. This is the Dean's house.
Yeah, I've been.
We're about to enter Palace Green, which is the strip of grass between the cathedral and the castle, and is at the heart of the city. Ahead of me, you can see the building which houses the Durham Union Debating Society. The debates would happen in here, and then students would head out to 24s for drinks afterwards. Under the shadow of the cathedral is one of the oldest ecclesiastical libraries in Britain. This was put together by a cleric known as Cousins, and is something I haven't seen before. It's very special. There won't be much point in visiting Durham without seeing the world-famous cathedral. Just in front of the door is the sanctuary knocker. This was something that anyone who committed a serious offence could knock on and request sanctuary from the cathedral, where they would be given 37 days of protection to try to make peace with their enemies. It's famous for holding the remains of two saints. One of them is the venerable Bede, who is buried here in the Galilee Chapel. Bede was born in 673 in Anglo-Saxon England, and will go on to become one of the foremost scholars of his age, popularising terms we still use today, like AD and BC, to record history. Here is his tomb. Apologies for the slightly awkward angle. At the other end of the cathedral lies the high altar, and with it the remains of St Cuthbert, perhaps the more famous of the two, at least within their lifetimes. St Cuthbert allegedly worked many miracles, including one time having prayed by the sea for an extended period, having his feet dried by otters. This church was largely erected in his memory. The church, of course, was built by the people of the North East, and it's continued to be used to this day. Here you have a memorial to the miners who did a lot of the heavy lifting to bring economic wealth to the region in the 19th century. Even before the university in the 1800s, the city was a place of learning, as evidenced by this clock from around 1494, one of the most advanced pieces of the medieval age. The core of the cathedral is Norman and dominated by these huge pillars, evidence of how the Normans sought to dominate the northeast and the land around it. As a centre of power, the cathedral has been able to acquire some very impressive pieces, such as this pulpit by the famous Victorian architect George Gilbert Scott, and everything, down to the marble floor, speaks of beauty and prestige. The Normans created the post of Prince Bishop, who could rule over effectively the north of England, mint his own coins, and raise his army. This meant that the bishops of Durham had a unique status amongst all the other bishops of England in terms of their authority, and the cathedral reflected that. It's a far cry from this, which is the back of the altar of St Cuthbert. St Cuthbert was a man who was so humble he retreated to an island to get away from it all, and now here he is being used to dominate the people of an entire region. It's very strange how history works. Time in the cathedral with this view of the raised window and surrounding windows, which depicts Christ in majesty, surrounded by the 24 elders. From 1075 to 1832, Durham and its surrounding environs were dominated by the Prince Bishop, who lived in the castle you can see ahead. We're going to be shown around today on a guided tour by one of the people who actually lives in the castle. It's now University College, so he is in fact a student. The interior of the castle has been heavily modified over the years, first by the Prince-Bishops and later by the university, and it now has its own bar in the Undercroft, where I spent several evenings during my time here. Right now we're in one of the oldest parts of the castle, the Norman Chapel. At the top of the columns you can see Romanesque sculptures, including a mermaid and several lions. The Norman Chapel was effectively replaced in the Tudor period by this rather nice chapel built by Tunstall. It has misericords, which are fancy seats with carvings on them, where the members attending the chapel would sit. Here you can see one. The corridor outside the chapel is a mishmash of styles and periods. You have sculptures from the Victorian era, and then a very fine Norman carving from the time of Bishop Pudsey in the 1200s. You have tapestries from the medieval era and some large chests from the same period, which would be used to store valuables and deter any would-be thieves from trying to steal them. Finally, at the end of the corridor you have the black staircase dating from the time of Bishop Cosin and decorated with pineapples, which were incredibly expensive fruits at the time, worth over £5,000. Our tour ends here, which is the College Hall at the heart of the castle. This is where the last Prince Bishop Van Mildert decided to turn the castle into the university college that it is today. Students still eat here, dining at the tables every week, and on the walls they're surrounded by paintings of former Prince Bishops and Chancellors of the college. It's now time to say farewell to the cathedral and the palace green, leaving behind the cloisters and heading on to one of the newer parts of the town and the university. I'm heading towards Potters Bank Road, which you'll see in a few seconds. This is home to one of my favourite parts of the university. This is of course the college I attended, Trevs. Built in the 60s by a slightly crazy architect, Trillium College was designed to encourage students to be as productive as bees, hence the prevalence of the hexagonal shapes. It also makes the college quite interesting and complicated to navigate. I'm not going to visit a museum which is near Trevs, but which I haven't visited before today. This is the Oriental Museum, which is focused largely on the area around the Silk Road. The pieces include exhibits from unusual strands of Christianity such as Coptic Egyptian Christianity and the Assyrian Church, as well as other pieces from the Silk Road like this wonderful Afghan women's dress which is brightly patterned. There's also some works from the Far East, including this giant teapot from Korea, which I think my girlfriend would love, given how much she loves tea, and these works from Japan, including this head of the Buddha and a wonderful suit of armour, which I think is from the Warring States period, which would probably have been worn by a samurai. The Japanese section is topped off by this wonderful painting of a tiger. It looks incredibly ferocious. Finally, heading down to the Chinese section, we have this gold panelled from Burma. While in the Chinese section we have this astrolabe, which is one of only two, the other being in the Forbidden City in Beijing. It shows how advanced the Chinese were in some aspects of astronomy. Leaving behind the Oriental Museum, it's time to head back to Newcastle. Just taking a last walk down the river. You can hear the roar of the wave in the distance as we head out.